The Canadian government is planning to remove an offensive name from a mountain in Banff National Park. Indigenous groups in Alberta say this is a step in the right direction, and they're now working on coming up with a new name. As Jayme Doll explains, momentum is building to rename other prominent parts of the Canadian Rockies. And a warning, some language in this story is offensive.
It's hiked on, camped on, biked on. Tunnel Mountain is one of the most frequented peaks in Alberta's Bow Valley. And for generations of First Nations people, it's a sacred place.
They held ceremonies there. They held trading. They traded there at the mountain and so on, visited there and so on. It was a gathering place.
The name Tunnel was given to this mountain following a mistake by a surveyor for the railway who thought a tunnel might have to be drilled through it. It didn't happen, but the name stuck. However, the Indigenous people already had a name for it.
It was called Iniistako.
In English, Buffalo Mountain. It's easy to see why they called it what they did. A petition is now in the works to put pressure on the provincial government to change the name to Sacred Buffalo Guardian Mountain.
It's one of those wonderful things we can do that I would call forward reconciliation. In other words, it will enrich us all, and it will name this feature in a much more descriptive and powerful way. And there's agreement across all the First Nations with association with this place.
In nearby Canmore, an effort is also being made to change the name of a distinct Rocky landmark. This peak doesn't actually have an official name, but the one commonly used does pop up on maps and blogs, and many are wondering why.
To use a name like Squaw's Tit, it's just another way that the mainstream society is saying to Indigenous people, like, we don't care about you. And it's not just like about squeamishness or morality, it's about ethics and social justice and caring for our fellow and sister human beings on this planet. It shows a lack of care for human life and respect.
There have already been 2 attempts to give the peak a lasting, less offensive name, but they haven't been approved.
I will say the government of Alberta has been very supportive, and part of it is coming up with a name that really is in keeping with the rich history and tradition of this area. And we need to be really intentional about that and make sure that the name that is chosen is one that will stick and that is one that will do justice to this beautiful mountain.
The Buffalo Treaty speaks to culture, conservation.
There's little arguing about what name Tunnel Mountain should be changed to among First Nations groups. In 2018, bison were reintroduced to the landscape of Banff National Park, and Indigenous leaders agree it's also time to bring back the original name of the mountain, resting in the heart of this iconic place. Jayme Doll, Global News, Banff, Alberta.
A highway project outside Cairo has conservationists concerned. The new road runs through an area dotted with ancient pyramids. The government insists no historic sites are being affected. But as Mike Armstrong explains, critics say the project may be paving its way through undiscovered archaeological sites.
The Egyptian government already tried to build this highway once. The project was started in the 1990s, but suspended after an international outcry. Well, it's going ahead now, barely 2 kilometers from a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Too close, says a former senior UNESCO official who already fought against it once.
Normally, in a World Heritage Site or in the buffer zone, because the World Heritage Site has a buffer zone around it, which allows some construction, provided there's been an environmental impact study made before.
One section of the new highway cuts right through a pyramid plateau south of Cairo. Among those on one side are the Red Pyramid and the Bent Pyramid. On the other, several more, including Pepi I and II, as well as the Step Pyramid. Now, the Step is the oldest of all pyramids. It was built about 4,600 years ago. At that point in history, the region was, in fact, the Egyptian capital city of Memphis.
It had lavish palaces. It was a thriving city, and it was the largest city in Egypt during that time.
Critics say the highway would mean more pollution from vehicles that could damage pyramids. It might even mean paving over archaeological sites that haven't been discovered. Well, the government insists that isn't happening. The Minister of Tourism and Antiquities says nothing is being touched, that any project in Egypt has to be approved by the Antiquities Ministry first. The government says the highway is needed for development and points out there are existing roads even closer to the pyramids now. But there are critics, and there could be more. Some archaeologists contacted by Global News admit there's resistance to speak out publicly because there's fear if they do, the government might not give them permits to work in the country. Mike Armstrong, Global News.